The day Caroline Miller realized her company was doomed didn't begin with a boardroom showdown or a billion-dollar collapse. It began with a pair of muddy sneakers propped on her desk and a 25-year-old heir grinning into a selfie. One careless post, one arrogant caption dash, "Finally running this place," was all it took to light the fuse. What no one knew was that Caroline had already wired the detonator months earlier. And when the trap closed, silence not fury would bring the empire to its knees. I knew the company was circling the drain the moment I opened my office door and saw a pair of muddy sneakers, cheap knockoff Jordans, this time planted right on my desk like it was a dorm room coffee table. My desk. My space. The same oak trim workstation I had defended like sacred ground through 16 years of late nights, endless contracts, and system diagrams taped to the walls until the cleaning crew gave up trying to peel them off. And in my chair, the ergonomic one I had personally requisitioned and justified through 3 rounds of budget meetings. At a boy. No, not a man. A boy. Frosted tips gleaming under the fluorescent lights, a vape pen in hand, grinning at me like we were sorority sisters caught sharing secrets. "Yo," he said, exhaling a puff of sickly sweet mango haze into my airspace. "You must be Caroline. Pop said you'd be chill." Pop. Only one man in this building let his son call him that without a shred of shame. Richard Vance, our freshly anointed CEO, imported from New York with teeth too white for natural enamel and an ego polished by years of selling charm instead of competence. And this, his heir apparent, his 25-year-old son Tyler, was lounging in my office on day one of the most precarious moment in the company's history. He raised his phone, angled it just right, and snapped a selfie from behind my desk. Not beside it. Not near it. From it. "Finally running this place," he typed with fat thumbs, captioning the moment before blasting it to Instagram with a location tag that shouted to the world, "Northbridge Logistics HQ, Chicago." I felt something then. Not the plummet of despair. Not even anger. Something colder, harder. My heart didn't sink. It calcified. Because I had seen his kind before. I had survived every flavor of corporate parasite in this building. The empty suits who never met a buzzword they couldn't repeat. The visionaries who couldn't run a stapler without a PowerPoint. The idea thieves who mistook plagiarism for leadership. Tyler was new only in his brazenness. He didn't bother pretending to care. He flaunted his ignorance like it came bundled with stock options. And here's the thing, I wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger is loud, clumsy. I was calm. Ice-cold calm. The kind of stillness that comes when you know you already set the trap months ago. 3 months earlier, while the rest of the executive team clinked glasses of overpriced mezcal to celebrate the Series C round, I was the only one hunched over the acquisition paperwork at 2 in the morning. Clause 7, page 46, buried deep in boilerplate legalese. A single paragraph, easily skipped. Any instance of reputational harm, misrepresentation of executive access, or breach of confidentiality by an employee or associated party may result in immediate termination of the acquisition agreement at the buyer's sole discretion. I had read it twice. Then a third time. It was a nuclear button dressed up as fine print. The kind of clause designed for nightmare scenarios: public humiliation, rogue statements, leaked screenshots. A clause almost paranoid in its wording, yet airtight in its power. And Tyler, bless his tiny, unwrinkled brain, had just triggered it in under 3 minutes of occupying my chair. I watched him stretch, one sneaker squeaking against the polished veneer of my desk. He refreshed his feed, grinned wider as the likes ticked upward. He was enjoying himself, oblivious to the trapdoor opening beneath his father's empire. I didn't flinch. Didn't give him the dignity of a scowl. If he looked up at me at all, he would have seen the kind of serenity that unsettles predators because it isn't prey they're staring at, it's the hunter who already knows where the snare is set. Without a word, I walked to the copy room. Printed the relevant pages of the acquisition packet. Highlighted clause 7 in neon pink like a warning flare. Attached the screenshot of his Instagram post, complete with timestamp and location, his smug little smirk immortalized forever. 1 interoffice envelope. 1 sticky note. For Clause C. I sealed it, slid it to legal, and walked back to my office. My former office. The boy didn't even notice. His feet were still up, his head bent over the glowing screen, basking in digital validation. People think corporate wars are fought with shouting matches and slammed fists. They're not. They're fought with clauses, with signatures, with screenshots sent at just the right moment. They're fought by the ones who don't raise their voices, just their leverage. And Tyler had just handed me enough leverage to topple his father's empire before the ink on the acquisition was dry. The envelope left my hand with the weight of inevitability. One stapled packet, one screenshot, one sticky note. It looked so harmless sliding into the legal department's inbox. But the moment it landed, the countdown began. They didn't know it yet. Tyler didn't know it. Richard certainly didn't know it. But Clause 7 wasn't some decorative line of fine print. It was a tripwire, a fuse, a loaded gun that only needed one careless finger on the trigger. And his son had just pulled it while grinning into a front-facing camera. Inside the cramped legal suite on the 6th floor, a junior associate was the first to open my envelope. He was halfway through his morning bagel when the neon highlight leapt out at him like a flare in the dark. He stopped chewing, reread the clause, then the screenshot, then the clause again. His lips moved silently over the words, any instance of reputational harm, misrepresentation of executive access. By the time the bagel hit the trash, 3 senior attorneys were huddled around his desk. One of them, Barbara Jenkins, a woman who had been redlining contracts since the Clinton administration, whispered in a voice that chilled the air. "This isn't decorative. This is nuclear." Within the hour, panic bled through the building like smoke under a locked door. Phones rang with clipped voices. Emails bounced with the word urgent in all caps. Assistants whispered in hallways like funeral ushers. Somewhere in the East Wing, a compliance officer muttered, "Oh, hell no," and suddenly nobody was laughing about gluten-free birthday cake anymore. Meanwhile, Tyler strutted through the open office like a tourist in Disneyland. He leaned against cubicles, showing junior staff his Instagram post, proudly narrating how many likes it had racked up in the last 15 minutes. 800 already, he beamed, tapping the heart icon like he'd cracked the code to corporate leadership. When someone asked if he was really running the place, he just winked and said, "Guess you'll see." The tragic comedy of it all was that Tyler believed his little digital stunt made him visible, important, powerful. In truth, it had just made him radioactive. Every floor he walked across grew quieter, not out of respect, but out of dread, as if they were watching a child juggle live grenades, oblivious to the pins scattered on the ground. Upstairs, the first message from Everline Industrial Holdings, our would-be buyer, landed in Richard Vance's inbox. It was clinical, sharp, devoid of pleasantries. "We have become aware of a public social media post made from your headquarters. Please confirm the identity, title, and authority of the individual in question, as well as whether a statement finally running this place reflects any shift in operational control. Pending clarification, integration activities are suspended." Suspended. One word. A chokehold wrapped in silk. Richard read it once, twice, then scoffed. "It's a joke," he told his assistant, waving the laptop screen away like a bothersome gnat. "Nothing serious. Just optics." But optics were everything. And the people around him knew it. The lawyers who had fought tooth and nail to keep Clause 7 in the acquisition contract were already whispering behind closed doors. The directors who had placed their bets on Richard's charisma were now forwarding the screenshot to each other with subject lines like, "Is this real?" and "Who is Tyler?" Even the interns, hunched over their keyboards, felt the shift. They straightened their posture, lowered their voices, glanced at the exits. Because when reputations catch fire, the flames lick down the hierarchy faster than any memo. And me? I walked through it all like a ghost, box in hand. It wasn't the dramatic kind of exit box you see in movies, piled high with plants and knickknacks. Mine was small, deliberate. One framed photo of my dog. One mug that said I survived another meeting that could have been an email. One USB drive containing the full version history of the system architecture I had built with my own sleepless hands. That USB was my lifeline, my weapon, my insurance policy. Because nestled within its folders was the truth no one in this building had bothered to notice. Every operational heartbeat of Northbridge Logistics ran through dependencies owned and licensed by my LLC Westgate Systems. I hadn't hidden it. I had filed the disclosures, dotted the I's, crossed the T's. But in their rush to celebrate funding rounds and court flashy advisors, nobody had read the fine print. Nobody but me. And so the very system they believed they were selling was, in fact, mine. Licensed, modular, elegant, and legally bulletproof. Tyler's post was the spark. Clause 7 was the fuse. But Westgate? That was the payload. As I passed the HR desk, one of them chirped, "Half day, Caroline?" Something like that, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. No one stopped me. No one asked questions. To them, I was just another tired executive burning out in silence. But inside, my veins ran with glacial calm. Not rage. Not panic. Just the certainty of a woman holding the only lifeboat while everyone else argued over deck chairs. Behind me, the walls trembled. Legal scrambled to draft explanations. Procurement scoured contracts, trying to untangle who owned what. Directors whispered about indemnity clauses. And Richard Vance, ever the salesman, tried to laugh it all away. But there are moments when laughter dies in your throat. When you realize the script you've been performing isn't comedy, it's tragedy. And Richard was only just beginning to choke on the lines. I walked through the revolving doors of Northbridge one final time, my badge left behind on the very desk Tyler still occupied, oblivious. He didn't even glance up. He was too busy refreshing his feed. The city air hit my lungs like absolution. For the first time in months, I felt light. Not free, not yet, but untethered. I had done my part. The email was sent. The evidence delivered. The dominoes were tipping. Somewhere above me, in glass offices lined with overpriced art, men in suits were realizing the truth. The acquisition wasn't steady. It wasn't guaranteed. It was fragile, breakable, already cracking. And all it had taken was one boy, one post, one clause, and one woman who refused to be erased. I gripped the handle of my small box a little tighter and walked toward the parking lot. Behind me, the circus was just beginning. The email from Everline Industrial Holdings landed like a steel hammer in the inbox of every director. Subject: Urgent clarification request, Clause 7 breach. Body: Please provide written confirmation regarding the individual known as Tyler Vance and his authority within Northbridge Logistics. Integration activities are suspended until further notice. Suspended. Again that word, tightening around Richard Vance's neck like a noose. He stared at it on his laptop as though sheer denial could will it away. It's optics, he muttered to the empty room, tugging at his tie. Just optics. We'll smooth it over. But optics can gut an empire faster than insolvency. And the board knew it. By 4 that afternoon, the emergency meeting was called. No time for catered lunches or polite small talk. Just a slate of stone-faced directors logging into a video conference, each camera a window of grim resolve. Some in their offices, some in cars parked on golf courses, one in a hotel room with curtains drawn against the daylight. They all had the same expression, exhaustion sharpened into fury. At precisely 4:02, the chairman, Harold Kessler, cleared his throat. His voice was gravel over steel. Let's address the obvious. Why the hell is Richard Vance's son posting from the desk of our senior VP of Systems on day 1 of a 9-figure acquisition? No one answered. The silence was thick, pulsing. Finally, Gloria Tran, head of risk oversight, spoke, her tone flat as a gravestone. This isn't about optics. This is a breach. Clause 7 is live. Richard tried for charm, that salesman's grin he'd polished for decades. Colleagues, let's not overreact. Tyler was shadowing me, just observing. He meant it as a joke dash. Harold cut him off like a blade. A joke? During an acquisition? On record? With a timestamp and a geotag? Do you understand what that looks like to Everline? Richard exhaled through his nose, eyes flicking toward the camera as if to find a sympathetic face. He found none. Even the junior directors, who usually nodded along, sat stiff-backed and silent. Then came the question that cracked the veneer entirely. Who gave him access, Richard? Cynthia Shaw, meticulous as ever, leaned forward, her voice a scalpel. Who gave Tyler Vance a badge? Who gave him clearance? Richard hesitated. His lips parted, closed, parted again. Finally, he borrowed my credentials. The silence that followed was not silence at all, it was condemnation made flesh. It was the slow turning of knives in sheaths, waiting for the signal to draw. Someone whispered, "Jesus Christ," under their breath. Cynthia's pen tapped once against her notepad. So, not only did your unvetted son impersonate an executive, but he did so using your login credentials? During due diligence. Richard swallowed hard, the grin dying on his face. It was harmless, Dash. No, Gloria snapped, her arms folded so tight her knuckles whitened. Clause 7 doesn't care about intent. It cares about perception. And perception just detonated. The boardroom fractured into overlapping voices, directors demanding explanations, others muttering about indemnity exposure, one shouting, "Who even owns the architecture now?" The CFO, pale as printer paper, finally spoke above the noise. Legal can't map the contracts without Caroline Miller. The name cut through the chaos like a bell toll. Caroline. The woman who had left that morning with a banker's box. The woman they had sidelined, underestimated, buried under the egos of louder men. And now, in her absence, she was the only name that carried weight. Find her, Harold ordered. But Cynthia already shook her head. Don't bother. She sent the email to Everline. She's not coming back for a meeting. The realization spread like frost across the room. Caroline had walked away, but her presence was everywhere in the code, in the contracts, in the bones of the systems none of them understood without her. The procurement lead finally unearthed the integration plan she had filed months ago. For weeks it had gathered dust because it was too technical. Now every line was suddenly scripture. And there, on page 14, they found the hidden gospel. All middleware components supporting operational analytics and vendor harmonization shall be licensed through Westgate Systems LLC, with exclusive rights for deployment, adaptation, and modification. Westgate Systems, someone murmured. That's Caroline's company. The words landed like a death sentence. Richard's face flushed pink, then paled. That was supposed to be scrubbed before submission, he stammered. Ops was supposed to dash. It's filed, Harold said coldly, holding up a printed copy. Digitally timestamped. Approved by 3 department heads. It's the foundation Everline used for their due diligence. You handed them the blueprints with her name on it. Richard turned to legal, desperate now. Can we stop her? Legally? Can we revoke the license? The general counsel's hands shook as he flipped through the binder. Technically, no. The survivability clause protects her. Even if the deal collapses, Westgate's terms remain enforceable. Revocation requires mutual consent. Mutual consent. Which meant Caroline had the keys, and no one else did. The room fell into suffocating quiet. No one dared move. Because they all understood what had just happened, the acquisition wasn't merely suspended. It was checkmated. Richard tried again, voice cracking. We can spin it. Reassure Everline. Frame this as a PR hiccup dash. Hiccup? Gloria's laugh was sharp, humorless. The buyer has already suspended all communication. That's not a hiccup, Richard. That's suffocation. The CFO rubbed his temples. Investors are already calling. Vendors too. Some are halting contracts until they know who owns the systems. One of them said, and I quote, "We trusted Caroline. We don't trust you." Richard sat down hard, sweat beading on his forehead. For the first time, the mask slipped completely. He looked not like a CEO, but like a man cornered, stripped bare, choking on his own hubris. Inside, a flicker of something unfamiliar clawed at him. Fear. Not for the company, not for his son, but for himself. Because he finally saw the truth: his empire was not his. It had never been his. It belonged to the quiet woman who never raised her voice, who never demanded credit, who simply built and documented and signed her name in the places no one else thought to look. Caroline Miller. The ghost in the machine. The architect of their fate. At 9:08 p.m., the board called the vote. Effective immediately, Tyler was banned from all company premises. Unanimous. No hesitation. Not even from Richard. The second motion followed like the guillotine's blade. Based on material breach under your leadership, Gloria said calmly, the board recommends administrative leave for Richard Vance, pending investigation. Richard opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. This is scapegoating dash. This is self-inflicted, Cynthia interrupted without looking up. You gave your son access. You handed him your credentials. You lit the match. Caroline just showed us where the gasoline was. 7 hands raised. Richard's did not. It didn't matter. The vote was final. By 9:15, HR escorted him from the building. His badge disabled, his email forwarded to IT. A single cardboard box waited by his office door like a tombstone. The boardroom was silent as the door clicked shut. Now, Harold said grimly, contact Caroline Miller. Cynthia was already typing, her message clinical, almost pleading. The board requests your participation in a confidential session regarding your system's integration plan and associated IP rights. Your expertise is critical to mitigating damage. Please advise your availability at your earliest convenience. They sent it. It delivered. It was read. And within minutes, Caroline replied with 10 words that landed heavier than any gavel. My intent was to prevent damage. Your son beat me to it. No greeting. No sign-off. Just the truth, weaponized. The directors sat in stunned silence, staring at the single line glowing on the screen. Some shifted uncomfortably. Others bowed their heads. Because in that moment, they all understood, Caroline wasn't begging to return. She wasn't negotiating. She wasn't asking. She had already won. The boardroom smelled of stale coffee and desperation. 12 directors sat in silence, their cameras flickering like confessionals in a church no one believed in anymore. They had ousted their CEO, exiled his son, and watched a billion-dollar acquisition crumble into dust all in the span of 24 hours. Yet the one person who could still save them wasn't in that room. She was at home. Caroline Miller. And she hadn't shouted, hadn't fought, hadn't even asked. She had forwarded an email, walked out with a banker's box, and left them drowning in their own arrogance. At 10 a.m. sharp, the meeting link with Everline Industrial Holdings went live. The buyer's representative appeared first, a tall, severe man in a tailored suit, jaw clenched, eyes cold. Behind him sat 2 associates, one scribbling notes, the other scrolling through documents already stamped with red. Everline wasn't here to chat. They were here to decide if Northbridge Logistics was salvageable or already a corpse. Then Caroline's camera flickered on. No polish, no stagecraft. Just her at her kitchen table, a plain mug half full of tea at her side. No makeup, no grand backdrop. Still as stone, eyes unwavering, the calm of a surgeon ready for one final incision. The Everline representative inclined his head. Miss Miller. Thank you for agreeing to meet. Caroline nodded once, silent. I'll be direct, he continued, voice clipped. Despite the complications, Everline remains interested in the integrity of your system. We believe in its architecture, even if Northbridge's leadership has proven. He paused, searching for the least offensive word, unstable. Would you be willing to license the system to us directly, through Westgate Systems? The board leaned forward. For a heartbeat, relief surged through them. A lifeline. A way back from the brink. Caroline's voice, when it came, was even deliberate. Yes. The directors exhaled audibly, tension breaking like a fever. Then she continued. But under 2 conditions. 1, triple the original licensing rate. 2, a full voting seat on the Northbridge board. Permanent. Not advisory. The silence that followed was suffocating. On screen, a director's face flushed crimson. Another slammed his fist against the table, microphone rattling. Gloria Tran closed her eyes, already calculating the cost. Harold Kessler muttered something that sounded like prayer or profanity. You can't be serious, one board member finally barked. Triple the rate? A board seat? That's extortion. Caroline didn't flinch. That's ownership. You had your chance at stewardship. You squandered it. The Everline representative leaned back, expression unreadable. He studied her for a long moment, then turned, slowly, to face the board. Do you object? The board hesitated. They wanted to fight, to bluster, to claw back some shred of dignity. But the truth sat between them like a loaded gun. They had no choice. Caroline owned the foundation. She owned the architecture. She owned the only thing worth buying. Motion to approve, Harold said at last, voice gravel. Seconded, Gloria replied. The vote was swift. Unanimous. Caroline didn't smile. Didn't thank them. She simply nodded once, closed her laptop, and disappeared from the screen. The call ended, leaving only the echo of inevitability. By dusk, the press release went live. Richard Vance to pursue new opportunities. Northbridge welcomes strategic partnership with Westgate Systems. The words were airbrushed, sanitized, hollow. Inside the company, the truth spread like wildfire. Richard had been stripped of his badge, his name erased from email, his photo yanked from the executive hallway. One cardboard box, one quiet exit. Tyler was already a meme. His infamous selfie feat on Caroline's desk, caption, finally running this place, circulated with hashtags like #Nepotism fail and #Clause7. One version plastered his face over a clown's body juggling burning contracts. Another paired his words with a stock photo of a dumpster fire. Screenshots don't die, they metastasize. Vendors pulled back. Investors raged. But slowly, inevitably, the bleeding slowed. Because when whispers reached the industry that Caroline Miller now held the keys, confidence returned. She wasn't loud, but her name carried weight. She was the backbone everyone had ignored until now. In the weeks that followed, Everline inked a direct licensing deal with Westgate at Caroline's terms. Triple the rate. Full board seat. She didn't ask for perks or the corner office or the catered lunches. She didn't want the parking space. She wanted control. And she got it. For the board, it was humiliation. For Richard, exile. For Tyler, infamy. But for Caroline, it was vindication. Late that evening, as storm clouds gathered over the city, she sat on her porch with a blanket over her lap. Her tea had gone cold, but she didn't care. Her phone buzzed steadily at her side, consulting requests, partnership offers, desperate pleas from companies that once passed her over for flashier names. She didn't rush to answer. Didn't bask in the glow. She simply sipped, watched the rain blur the horizon, and let the quiet settle in her bones. Because power isn't in shouting. It isn't in speeches or hashtags or showmanship. Power is in foresight. In patience. In writing your name in the places no one bothers to read until it's too late. She thought of the day she first registered Westgate Systems 2 years ago, when whispers of Richard's rise had crept into shareholder calls. She remembered the long nights isolating dependencies, building elegant code that could be withdrawn like oxygen from a room. She remembered the smirk on Richard's face when he dismissed her as technical support, and the smug chuckle Tyler had given when he put his sneakers on her desk. They had underestimated her silence, mistook quiet for weakness. Now the industry whispered a different story. Not about Richard, not about Tyler, but about Caroline Miller, the woman who never raised her voice, never begged, never slammed a door. The woman who toppled a CEO, halted a billion-dollar deal, and rebuilt her company's future with a single email. She never shouted, the whispers went. She never begged. She just forwarded one email. Caroline set her mug down, listening to the distant thunder roll over the fields. Somewhere inside the storm, she almost thought she heard laughter, soft, steady, the kind that comes not from joy, but from knowing you've already won. And in that moment, she did smile. Not for them. Not for anyone watching. Just for herself. The checkmate was complete. Sometimes, the most devastating moves in life are not made with raised voices, slammed doors, or fists on polished tables. They're made in silence. In foresight. In the patient discipline of someone who sees the game 5 steps ahead, while everyone else is still laughing at their own jokes. Caroline Miller never once shouted. She never barged into the boardroom demanding recognition. She never plastered her name across PowerPoints or bragged about late nights spent keeping the company alive. She let others drink champagne and pose for photographs. And then, when the moment came, She revealed the truth. Power is not in performance, it's in preparation. The board thought they owned her. Richard believed charm could cover negligence. Tyler assumed likes on a screen meant authority in a room. But the architecture of control had already been written, line by line, in contracts and code they hadn't bothered to read. When the spotlight swung her way, she didn't need a speech. She had the receipts. There is a lesson here that stretches far beyond boardrooms and acquisitions. In your own life, in your own work, there will be moments when you are overlooked, underestimated, maybe even dismissed as irrelevant. That silence can feel heavy, like absence. But silence is not absence if you fill it with preparation, if you write your name into the foundations, if you build something no one else can take from you. Because when the storm comes, and it always comes, it won't be the loudest voice that endures. It will be the one who laid the trap quietly, the one who did the work no one applauded, the one who knows the blueprint better than anyone else in the room. And maybe that's why stories like this matter. Because we all know a Tyler. We've all met a Richard. And maybe, just maybe, we've been a Caroline in the shadows, waiting for our moment not to scream, but to strike. So if this story made you think, if it lit even a spark of recognition in your own journey, I'd love to hear it. Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about the battles you fought in silence, the victories no one expected. And if you'd like to keep walking through stories like this, don't just drift past, join us. Hit that button. Stay with the narrative. Because in the end, it's not just about watching someone else's checkmate. It's about preparing for your own.